Today, I'll be interviewing reading and learning specialist Faith Borkowsky. Faith is the author of the award-winning book, Failing Students or Failing Schools, A Parent's Guide to Reading Instruction and Intervention, and is the founder of High Five Literacy and Academic Coaching. Faith has been a reading and literacy specialist for over 30 years as a classroom teacher and is Orton Gillingham trained and is also a Wilson certified dyslexia practitioner. Today, we'll be talking about the challenges many children face with distance learning, especially those with dyslexia, and how parents can help their children meet these challenges. Welcome, Faith, and thanks for joining me today.
Oh, thank you for having me. So good to see you, Don.
It's nice seeing you too. So, as an educator and reading specialist, what sort of challenges have you observed this school year?
So I want to make it clear that the challenges in reading instruction are the same as there were before the pandemic. So some of the challenges I see involve, the school still using leveled readers when we're trying to get kids to really look through a word, reading left to right, using their phonics skills to be able to read. And then they're given books where they have to be put into words that really they can't possibly know how to read without looking at pictures and cues. So that has not changed. Those are the same challenges that were there before. Obviously, however, the pandemic has added to some of these challenges. But as far as instruction goes, if it hasn't changed at the district level, whether it's online or not, we're still seeing those same problems.
Yes. So, what special challenges face parents and students who are new to distance learning or homeschooling?
Well, I think that in school, children certainly get more of an opportunity to write and to speak. So I think if we're not careful, this distance learning could be very passive learning, where everything is receptive. They have to listen a lot. And we don't have the social cues to know when a child really needs to respond or what he or she might be thinking. So that's a real challenge. I think the expressive part, being able to speak and to write, is, both of those are huge in terms of children retaining information. And from what I see and from what I've heard from parents, they're just, clicking the mouse, pressing buttons. They're not really able to express themselves the way they would in a classroom.
So many parents that I've talked with are seeing the degree of difficulty their child faces in reading and have no idea how to help. What do you suggest?
Right. Well, that's an interesting question because you first have to know what exactly is the issue. We can't help children unless we know what we're talking about. So same thing when you do an assessment for a child. You have to know where the deficit areas are. We have to kind of look at that child and figure out what exactly is holding this child back. Usually it's the foundational skills. It's phonological difficulties, decoding difficulties. So for a parent to be able to help and determine what exactly is the problem, we have to be able to say, well, let's take some words out of context and be able to see, can this child actually read these words? If there are no pictures and there are no other repetitive words along with those words. So I'm a big believer in using, some words where they have to truly decode, not words that they've already memorized. You could see if children are able to rhyme. Not that that is the determining factor. We know that what's really important, what's predictive of children being able to read are the individual phonemes, but just rhyming in general. Young children have difficulty either producing rhymes, generating rhymes, understanding rhyme. That's a sign that there could be something going on. So if you see those types of phonological difficulties, decoding difficulties, a parent might want to start trying to get kids to attend to letter sound correspondence, reading left to right, encouraging children to use their finger under the word so they're really looking at the words, not at the pictures. Getting them decodable books so that those types of books encourage children to look through a word, especially if they're cumulative in nature. Could start at the very beginning, seeing what they're able to do and start showing them the letter sound correspondence. If, on the other hand, that seems to be okay, what then is holding them back? Are they able to understand language, just spoken language? Because if that's difficult, they're going to be, it's going to be hard for them to understand if they're reading it themselves. They can't even understand how to follow directions, or multi-step types of information would be difficult for them. So that's something you would want to work on in language. Just slowly having them really listen to what's being asked and how to responding in complete sentences. So it really depends, I think, ultimately on what is the issue.
Yes. So it sounds like the parent has a lot of extra work that they need to do when they're being the primary teacher at home. Now, some parents remark that the workload is too much for their child. For example, they're assigned a few chapters to read in whatever book it might be, and then asked to write a 500-word report. Now, how can a parent know what their child can reasonably do, especially if they have a learning challenge? And how can they communicate their observations to their teacher?
All right, so a couple of things going on. First, let's talk about the word reasonable. What does that really mean? Reasonable for grade level, appropriate grade level work, or just reasonable in general? So I'll give you an example. When my son was in elementary school, I remember that he came home every night with lots and lots of math problems for homework. And he did not have any learning problems, but he was being given about 50 long division problems. At his age, I think it was about third grade. That to me was unreasonable. I wanted him to go outside and play. He was an active kid. He needed to get out and move. And he was having a hard time just sitting there doing the work, and he understood long division. So what you could see in 5 to 10 examples, you don't need 50 examples. That's unreasonable in my mind. So, and that has nothing to do with a learning challenge. Sometimes there's just busy work. So I think you need to sort out, well, what is busy work? And then what is reasonable for a typical learner at grade level? And then decide what a parent can do when a child struggles, a child with learning challenges. So I think this also goes back to foundational skills, foundation. So if, let's say, a child is in 4th grade and has trouble with handwriting, has trouble with reading the words on the page, has difficulty reading the words at a good pace, Well, of course, when it comes time to responding to something and reading, or just keeping up with the workload, it's going to be awful because it's an overload on working memory. And I think that's what a parent would need to say to a teacher. How can we work together so that you could know if my son or daughter understands the work, can do the work? Are there ways we could get information for both of us without this being torturous? So, first thing we would want to do is figure out where the gaps are. Could we get this child help to fill in gaps to make everything else a little bit easier? And this is where having accommodations would be helpful, not to have the child depend on the accommodations and not to use this as an excuse, but to kind of fill in some gaps while the child is strengthening those underlying skills. It would be important.
Very nice. So what suggestions would you offer to parents wondering if their child needs to be tested for learning challenges?
All right, so as far as testing, I would not depend on the school to tell me if my child needs to be tested. I think that's probably the number one suggestion. Don't let someone tell you that your child is just doing fine. If you feel that there's something wrong, follow that feeling. You're usually right. You know your child better than anyone. And I think many times children get help probably too late. And I don't say too late where it can't be helped, but late in the game where they've already missed that window of trying to close the gap when it's a narrow gap. And then it makes it so much harder when the gap widens. So do not listen when the school tells you everything is fine, just wait and see. The child could be immature. We don't want to delay getting help. With that said, I think that we really need to know about speech and language difficulties and how they align to reading. If a child received speech and language help before entering elementary school, there is a very good chance that child will struggle in reading and writing. So right away, if you have a child who had any type of early intervention before school even started, 3 years old, 2, 4 years old, you should be on high alert and not wait. Follow your instinct. If a child had OT, fine motor, physical therapy, any of those types of things, there's a good chance that a child will struggle with reading and writing because there is comorbidity. There are things that overlap. There are indications that there could be a problem. A child with attention deficit issues early on, it's hard for them to attain to a task. You have to be really on top of these things and don't let people tell you it's developmental. Don't wait.
Mm-hmm. Very good advice there. So in these unprecedented times, what realistic expectations would you encourage families to have for their child during the school year?
All right, so that word realistic kind of it's tricky. It's tricky, and here's why. For years, people have used that term realistic expectations when talking about children living in poverty. And it would be, they would throw their arms up and say, well, what do you want? This child comes from a family where parents aren't educated. They don't have, breakfast. They don't have their basic needs being met. What do you want us to do? This is the situation. And I don't want COVID to become another one of those terms where we say, well, what do you want? It's a pandemic. We can't help it. My feeling with all of that is, yes, there are challenges. You and I were just talking about the challenges before we even started this recording, how it is difficult. This doesn't mean that we use this as an excuse. It means we have to find ways to still build connections and get kids to where they have to be, but maybe not in the same ways we did before. And maybe that means that there needs to be more communication between school and home, more so than ever. Maybe we need to do more wraparound services for parents, bringing in mental health professionals and really looking at community school models of education, which have been around forever, but they've never really taken off. So maybe the community school model, its time has come. I don't know. But I do think that there is a problem when we use the term realistic expectations, because that's almost code for, this becomes the reason why everything has gone down the tubes. No, we can't look at that. We can't allow kids to fail because we're in the middle of a pandemic. We have to be creative. Maybe there should be more team teaching going on at the elementary school. I have a strength in this area. You have a strength in a different area. We need to work together more and use our strengths. Parents, maybe those parent pods. I'll take the kids for babysitting outside to play, while maybe you have a strength in this area. Could you help my child? I think we just have to be more community centered, bring community awareness to this. And that's what I'm trying to do now with an organization called Teach My Kid to Read. It's a new nonprofit. The founder is Marion Waldman. And I met Marion a while ago, and she and I connected about trying to get the word out to parents. And that line, teach my kid to read, that's all parents want. Teach my kid to read. Bottom line, we don't need a million experts debating this anymore. We know what works. We don't need to belabor the point of certain terminology. I've mentioned this before. I don't really care what you call it. Simplify it, make it as easy as possible for people to understand. That's the kind of language I try to use in my books. I've used in Failing Students or Failing Schools. If only I would have known. I believe simple is best. Keep it simple. And let's not complicate the issue. We just want to teach kids to read. And so Teach My Kid to Read is about bringing community awareness to parents early on and using libraries as a resource for this information, as well as hopefully pediatricians and daycare centers, preschool teachers. We need to get the word out early, and we need to provide training and support for parents who cannot afford private tutoring. So this is just unfair, and the schools are not responding fast enough. And that doesn't mean that we don't work with the schools. I have provided professional development to school districts. I'm always available for SEPTA meetings, and I've done presentations. But in the end, we need to bring this to a community level. There are areas across the country in Black and brown communities where they are not well served, and they cannot easily go out and get these expensive reports by a neuropsychologist or hire parent advocates. So, I've said this before, when we talk about Black Lives Matter, we need to do more. It's easy to put up a sign in windows, store windows, Black Lives Matter, but I think we need to be doing way more for Black and brown communities and people across the country. I don't care what color you are. The word needs to get out, and we need to get parents into libraries, using the library, having libraries well stocked with decodable books. If the schools are not stocking them, they need to be in libraries so that parents and teachers have a choice. So that's my answer to my long answer to what you just asked.
Well, very good. So what ideas can you offer to parents to help them make learning feel like fun for their kids?
All right, so I think probably one of the most important things you could do is get kids to stand up and learn. And what I mean by that is chalkboard and chalk. To me, number one, if you could have children writing on a vertical surface, so an easel, putting a board up in, a room, using that type of chalkboard paint. It's fun, and it's not just fun. There are so many benefits to writing on a vertical surface. Kids cross the midline when they write. When they use chunky chalk, it helps to prepare them for pencils. They are standing up, so they're strengthening their core to write. When we write on a flat surface, many times children don't have the strength in their upper bodies because they're not used to standing up and working. We need to get them moving more. So number one for me is writing on a vertical surface, painting, using an easel, kind of the old-fashioned way kids learned. So, and I say bring that back. That to me is so important, using small pieces of chalk to write with, because that pincer grip is developed by picking things up with the pincer grip. Giving kids a microphone to talk into and making that fun, reading aloud into a microphone and then having it played back so they could hear it. That is very, very helpful. Using a flashlight at night so that kids could read in the dark. They love to read in bed, make a tent, read with a flashlight. The flashlight could also be used as a way to trace letters. So, visualize a letter, do it in the air with the flashlight in the dark so they could see it. And this way you could see if they're forming their letters correctly, first with gross motor movement and then bringing it to fine motor movement. So notice how nothing here is expensive. Nothing is expensive. Chalk, flashlight, microphone, maybe a little bit more, but that could be a nice Christmas gift. Nothing really needs to cost a lot. I would say get them off the toys where it's all these electronic toys. They're on the computer now from morning till late afternoon, many of them, with this online learning. So we need to get them up, moving, having some fun. But I say the number one thing, if you want something that is useful and fun, get them a vertical surface to write on.
Very nice. Some excellent suggestions there. I wouldn't mind trying that myself. It gets kind of old being stuck in front of a computer, doesn't it?
Right. And also it's really important because it gets the wrist in the right position. They're also close to what they're writing. So physically closer when they're at a board than they are when they're writing at a desk. So they really get a chance to connect with the writing. So there are that's going to be, when I have grandchildren, that's going to be my first gift when the child turns 2 years old. That's the 2-year-old gift, will be chalkboard.
Very nice. So where can people find your books and other resources you offer?
So my books are on Amazon and Barnes and Noble online. So it's Failing Students or Failing Schools, A Parent's Guide to Reading Instruction and Intervention, and If Only I Would Have Known. And that is a way to get parents to know about language, literacy, and dyslexia. It's a book where I used fictional characters to explain concepts in a very simple way. So, and I take parents through conversations. What would have been nice if a pediatrician would have given them this information, or a preschool teacher could have talked to them, or a librarian could have guided them with some of these issues. And so I pretty much cover all the early childhood goals through conversations with a fictional family. And this book I used an illustrator as well. So those books could be found on Amazon. And as far as other ways to find me, I have a website, high5literacy.com. I have a Facebook page as well, High Five Literacy and Academic Coaching. I have a Twitter account on Twitter. I communicate with people all the time. And the two organizations that I am passionate about now are Teach My Kids to Read, which approaches that instructional piece through the community, as well as Dyslexia Initiative, which is really about parent advocacy. So I think that's a nice blend, for parents to take a look in those two places. So.
Very nice. Well, thank you so much, Faith, for taking the time to talk with us today.
Thank you, Don. It's a pleasure, and stay well. And let's keep our fingers crossed that things get better.
Yes, definitely. So Faith's book, excellent book, Failing Students or Failing Schools, is available in softcover, hardcover, ebook, and audiobook formats. And you can click on the link in the description below to learn more about High Five Literacy and about her books and where you can purchase them. Thank you again, Faith.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Bye.